sky. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Our guests in Seoul, South Korea, Chung-in Moon, professor of political science, Yonsei University, editor-in-chief of Global Asia and English Quarterly magazine, previously served in the South Korean government, where he was involved with diplomatic efforts and met with Kim Jong-il, who died on Saturday. They say at the age of 69, though others say he was 70. Christine Ahn is joining us from the University of California, Berkeley studios, executive director of Korea Policy Institute. Christine Ahn, if you could continue with this history lesson that Professor Chung-in Moon began especially for people here in the United States. You know the lack of geographical awareness of people here. We live in an insulated world, a globalized world, but we're very insulated in the United States. What do you feel it's most important to understand about North Korea in a global context?
Thanks, Amy. I appreciated Professor Moon's brief history lesson, but I felt he kind of omitted a few key factors in explaining that very pivotal moment in Korean history. Yes, the Korean Peninsula was divided unilaterally, first by the United States and then with a sort of nod of agreement from the Soviet Union. But it also played a very critical role in installing a military government in South Korea. And since that period, since 1945, when it first landed in Incheon, it has had, up to, now it currently has 28,500 troops on the Korean Peninsula. But the part about South Korea's democracy being really quashed, actually, for quite many decades with the backing of the U.S. And I think that's the bit of Korean history that Professor Moon had left out. And the other bit about Korea that most Americans don't realize is that the Korean War, which was the first Cold War, the front of the Cold War, and it continues to be the remaining war that has been unresolved. And I would say that it's very crucial to understand that the fact that the Korean War has not ended has very much to do with the situation that North Korea finds itself in and the fact that it is still the most militarized region in the world.
Professor Chung-in Moon, would you like to respond?
Yes. There are good things and bad things. United States has played some role in the Korean division, and also United States was patronizing military government in South Korea. But eventually, in 1987, South Korea achieved the democratization with little help of the United States by our own, the passion and power. Therefore, I think that the United States has some part in it, but I think the South Korean people have been able to achieve, the democratization. Since then, and we have been achieving both growth and democracy in South Korea, even though there are some temporal setbacks of our democratic movements.
Christine Ahn, if you could expand to talk about this issue of the Korean Peninsula being the most militarized region on Earth, and the issue of North Korea being a nuclear nation and what this means in this transition of power.
Well, there are an estimated 1.2 million landmines still strewn across the demilitarized zone, across the 38th parallel. North Korea is, I think that's the mixed legacy of Kim Jong-il. And, on the one hand, he inherited a very difficult situation in North Korea in 1994. The country had just, with the passing of Kim Il-sung, which was the only leader that the country had known since 1945, 1948. And the fact that that country was undergoing tremendous, calamitous shocks, external and internal. 1994, it was on the brink of war with the United States. The Clinton administration was poised to strike its Yongbyon processing plant. It had endured serious serial droughts and harsh inclement weather that is very similar to the patterns of climate change that we're seeing today, especially throughout Asia. And it endured the collapse of the socialist trading bloc. So its dependence on not just exchange with China and the Soviet Union, but especially the import of fuel to just run basic things like the tractors to operate its agricultural system. And so it endured a very difficult famine, and up to, as you mentioned, up to 1 million people perished in that famine. And so this was the period in which Kim Jong-il took over the reins. And, I think that it's really critical to understand the kind of geopolitical context and the fact that North Korea has always viewed its engagement with the United States through the six-party talks as an opportunity to normalize relations, because they have viewed the engagement with the West and the normalization, especially with the United States, its historic enemy, as crucial for its economic recalibration. And unfortunately, whether it's the Bush administration, whether it's the Obama administration, or even the Clinton administration, it has always viewed North Korea as, this basket case country that is on the brink of collapse. And that has tremendous consequences, not just for peace on the Korean Peninsula or for the region, but for the very security and survival of the people of North Korea, who are struggling on a day-to-day basis to have access to food, to have access to electricity. So if I were to say one thing on this show, it's, we need to promote engagement, we need to promote dialogue, and that's what we know works. As Professor Moon has mentioned, in that period of Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, the previous presidents before Lee Myung-bak, there was a period of not just engagement between North and South Korean leaders and governments, but among civil society and families that have been divided. There are, millions of Korean families, especially here in the United States, who have still family in North Korea. So I would say that this is an opportunity to, we can conjecture all we want what's going to happen to North Korea and under the leadership of Kim Jong-un or the political elite, but what we can do is try to influence our political leaders to, be in the spirit of engagement, direct dialogue, and promotion of peace and reconciliation.
Christine Ahn, Executive Director of the Korean Policy Institute. Can you talk about the significance of the nuclear bomb that North Korea has and how that really is what directs U.S. policy towards North Korea? And your sense of who Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il's son, who is expected to succeed him, went recently with him on a trip to China, but very young, who he is and what the top circle in North Korea, how much power it wields versus what the son will wield.
Well, Amy, sorry, I got derailed there for a minute, but I would say that's the mixed legacy of Kim Jong-il. I would say that the ordinary North Korean, and it's so hard to tell. Even the CIA says we don't know what we don't know about North Korea. And as you mentioned, the intelligence failure where, most of the world didn't even know that he had passed away 2 days after it had happened. But the situation with Kim Jong-il is, that the people, were hoping for economic improvement in their day-to-day lives, and he was not able to see that through. But on the other hand, this is a perspective that I was able to get by traveling throughout North Korea, and it is that there's a kind of reverence for Kim Jong-il by the people, because the North Korean people have a deep sense of needing sovereignty and independence, and that is because the birth of North Korea as a nation was essentially the result of, resistance and revolution against foreign occupation. And that includes, 35 years of Japanese occupation, but it also includes what they perceive as U.S. military occupation and the division of the Korean Peninsula. So in some sense, there is a reverence for Kim Jong-il because he was able to acquire a nuclear weapon. And there was a pride that the North Koreans had about North Korea joining the nuclear club. And I think it's important, though, to clarify that North Koreans, don't have that pride because they want to wield that nuclear weapon to, to threaten or terrorize the rest of the world. But I'd say that in my conversations with the people of North Korea, it was that, we are we are lucky we have this because we won't be another Iraq. We won't be another victim of U.S. military invasion. And, you know, the thing is that they are speaking from the lived experience. When I went to North Korea, I had a very interesting insight where I would travel around the country, and with our guides, you know, they would always point to this building. This was a restaurant. It was, you know, very ancient-looking Korean building. But I was wondering, why do they always keep pointing that building out? And the thing that was really surprising is that was the only building that remained since the Korean War. Otherwise, the rest of Pyongyang was essentially leveled. And that was because of the devastating air raids. More bombs were dropped in the Korean War than in World War II. Napalm was introduced. I mean, the U.S. Bombed dams, which was considered a war crime under the Geneva Convention. So this is the kind of mindset, the kind of narrative that is so deeply woven into the North Korean psyche. And I think that we have to understand that as people in the United States, as a starting point to understand why in the six-party talks, why in the bilateral negotiations with North Korea so desperately wants to build a relationship, and then they want to denuclearize, whereas the Obama, the Clinton, the Bush administrations have always viewed those fora to just disarm North Korea. And North Korea says, you know, that's not good enough. We need to have normalized relations. We need to have a peace treaty. And that has been their stance, you know, starting from Kim Il-sung through Kim Jong-il. And
as we